I'm sitting on the floor of our walk-in closet, and the cold of the marble is seeping right through the thin silk. This room is the size of my first apartment back in Chicago. Dan designed it for me, just like he designed everything else in this life. He designed me. In my hand is his phone. Heavy, cold, and not mine. My heart is pounding so hard I'm sure he can hear it in the bedroom. But it isn't guilt. Guilt is a warm, sticky kind of emotion. What I'm feeling is rage. Clean, sharp, like a sliver of ice. I've been sleeping with Silas for 6 months. I should be the one worried about getting caught. I should be the one hiding my phone. But here I am, trapped in a cage of cashmere and cedar, breaking into his life because Dan has changed. For the last 2 weeks, Dan, my loud, my passionate, my hurricane of a husband, has gone quiet. Dangerously quiet. He isn't looking at me anymore. He's looking through me. And he started doing the one thing he never, ever did in our 10 years of perfect, architect-drawn marriage. He started putting his phone face down. I know it's the worst cliché in the book. The kind of thing you see on cheap daytime TV. But our marriage was never a cliché. Our life was an original script. Until now. His silence isn't peace, it's the vacuum before the explosion. My fingers are shaking. I know the password. It's the date he sold his first big project here in Austin. He thinks it's romantic. I think it's self-centered. The phone unlocks. I open his texts. Empty. Just chat groups from his architecture firm. Renderings for City Hall. Permit approval on HRA. No Emily. No Jess. No kissy face emojis. Nothing. I open his photos. Nothing. Just screenshots of golf courses, renderings of his new glass monster downtown, and a dozen pictures of our dog he took last weekend. I open his email. Bills, newsletters, the usual work grind. I almost let out a breath. I almost feel crazy. Paranoid. The ungrateful, cheating wife looking for a reason to justify her own sins. And that's when he walks in. He doesn't stomp. He doesn't yell. He just appears in the doorway, already dressed in his perfect gray suit. He is smiling. That same devastating, all-forgiving smile he used to charm the board of directors when he was 28. The blood drains from my face. I'm frozen, like a kid caught stealing. The phone in my hand feels red hot. He calmly asks if I was looking for something. His voice is even, like he's asking what kind of coffee I want. My own voice won't work. I lie. I tell him I was looking for our reservation at Uchi for Friday. That I couldn't find the confirmation in my email. Dan walks toward me slowly. He doesn't reach for the phone. He crouches down in front of me, so his eyes are level with mine. He's still smiling. He tells me I'm so cute. He asks if I forgot that he keeps everything in the cloud, that all the reservations are linked to his assistant. He gently, with just 2 fingers, takes the phone from my hand. I'm waiting for the hurricane. I'm waiting for him to start throwing things. This is Dan. He's the life of the party, the center of the storm. Anger is his element. But he doesn't get up. He sits down next to me on the floor. Right on the expensive silk and wool rug. He looks at me, and his eyes have something new in them. Something I've never seen. A kind of fake, new age concern. He tells me he knows I've noticed him pulling away these last few weeks. He says I have a right to be upset. I'm silent. I can't breathe. He tells me the truth is, he started therapy. Online. And he's been meditating. I blink. That's impossible. Dan thinks therapy is a scam for weak people. He seems to read my mind. He says he knows it sounds strange. But there's just been so much pressure. The new project, the stress. And he didn't want to burden me with it. He wanted to handle it himself. He unlocks the phone again. His thumb hovers over the screen. He shows me the Calm app. The blue circle with the peaceful lake. He tells me he's just trying to be present. That his therapist recommended he keep a mindfulness journal. He leans in and hugs me. His concern feels like ice. He stands up, offers me a hand. He tells me he loves me, and then he heads for the shower. I stay on the floor. I should feel relieved. I should believe him. I should feel like a monster. But all I feel is the adrenaline draining away, leaving only a cold, sticky fear. I don't sleep that night. I lie there, listening to his steady, confident breathing. At 3:15 in the morning, I take his phone from the nightstand. He wasn't lying. The Calm app is right there. I open the session history. 1 session. Last night. At 3:15 in the morning. Duration, 1 minute. 1 minute. He isn't just lying. He is mocking me. He doesn't just know I suspect something. He wants me to know that he's lying. He's not defending himself. He's setting a trap. That 1-minute meditation wasn't a mistake. It was a message. It was Dan, in his most clever, most cruel way, letting me know the game was on. And he was making the rules. I didn't marry a man. I married a hurricane. Dan didn't just walk into my dull Chicago life, he leveled it. He rescued me from my dusty gallery job, my gray little apartment, my predictable, safe kind of sad. He brought me to Austin like some rare, exotic prize. He didn't just build our house. He designed me. I am his best project. The architect's wife. I still have that copy of Tribeca magazine. I'm on the cover. Standing barefoot on our perfect polished concrete floor, wearing a $1,000 linen dress, holding a coffee mug. The headline read, Collins's perfection. Not Anna's perfection. I was his living, breathing blueprint. At every party he loved to throw, he would brag about my taste, my little art gallery, which he, of course, had financed, my essence. But he never listened to me. He just waited for his turn to talk. He didn't ask how my day was. He told me how my day should have been, to match his brilliant standards of success. I wasn't a partner. I was an accessory. His most expensive and beautiful one. Silas is not a project. Silas is dust. Book dust, sunlight dust in his quiet, overstuffed shop. I stumbled into the last page by accident. It was the day Dan had forgotten, the anniversary of my father's death. He hadn't really forgotten. He just decided it was more important for us to go to a charity dinner that night because the mayor would be there. He told me my father would have understood, that it was for a good cause. I ran out of that dinner, practically choking on my dress and his ambition. I wandered into Silas's shop. He was closing up. It didn't smell like expensive cologne and ozone, like Dan. It smelled like old paper and real, strong espresso. He looked up at me, not at my dress, not at my diamonds, but at my face. And I just burst into tears. Right there, by the biography section. I expected him to be awkward. To call the police or, worse, offer some positive thinking. But he just quietly made me a cup of coffee in an old pot. He sat across from me and he listened. I told him everything. About Dan. About my father. About feeling like a fake, a beautiful empty shell. He listened. And then he said just one thing. He said it's hard to compete with the dead. And it's even harder to compete with men who think they're gods. Nothing happened that night. Or the next. Our affair didn't start with sex. It started with breathing. It started with 6 months of quiet Wednesday conversations, which I passed off as yoga. Silas was a widower. He knew what real, undesigned loss felt like. He didn't look at me. He saw me. He was the only person in Austin who wanted nothing from me except me. That's why Dan's lie about meditation was so terrifying. It meant he'd stopped being just a self-absorbed hurricane. He had become a cold, calculating strategist. Last night, he came home beaming. He dropped a bag from Whole Foods on the counter and kissed me. He was bursting with news. He asked me to guess who he ran into downtown. I shrugged. I was sorting the mail, and my fingers froze on a bill. He said he met that nice fellow from the bookstore, Silas. I slowly looked up at him. Dan was glowing. He said they got to talking, and Silas just seemed so lonely. So authentic. I asked him why he was telling me this. And Dan dropped the bomb. He said he invited him to our annual barbecue on Saturday. My throat closed up. I couldn't say a word. Dan kept going, his voice full of that fake, showy charity. He said Silas mentioned his teenage daughter. And Dan, of course, had offered to let him bring her to our pool anytime. He told me his daughter apparently loves our neighborhood. And that we, after all, should be good neighbors. I just stared at him. My charismatic, brilliant, sociopathic husband. I realized he didn't just know. He knew everything. And he wasn't going to have a scene. He wasn't going to fight. He was going to do what he did best. He was turning my lover, my only escape, into his next charity case. He wasn't getting rid of the threat. He was taming it. He was absorbing it. He was making Silas a part of our perfect, phony life. And that was more terrifying than any fight could ever be. I was just driving. I didn't even know where I was going. I missed my exit on the Mopac freeway, and I didn't care. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles were white. I could hear my own blood pounding in my ears. He invited him. He invited Silas into our home. Into the very center of our lie. I couldn't go home. I couldn't breathe that sterile, Dan-designed air. I was driving to Silas. I had to warn him. I had to see him. I flew into the last page, the little bell over the door jingling frantically, breaking the holy quiet of the place. Silas was sitting at his massive oak desk, fixing the spine of some old book. He looked up at me. He was calm. As if he were expecting me. I must have looked like a crazy person. My hair was falling out of the perfect style I create every morning. I dumped it all on him, my whisper louder than a scream. I told him Dan knew. That he had invited him to our house. That he called him a nice guy and a charity project. I told him it was a trap, that Dan was going to destroy us. That he was going to turn it into some monstrous show, one of his brilliant performances. I demanded that we do something. That we stop this. That we run away. I didn't even know what I was demanding. I expected him to jump up. To be scared. To finally show some kind of passion, other than his quiet, dusty understanding. Silas didn't stand up. He slowly ran a line of glue along the book's spine. He looked at me. Not like a lover. Not like an ally. He looked at me like a doctor looks at a patient with a diagnosis he's seen 100 times before. He waited until I was finished, until I had run out of air. Then he spoke. His voice was just as even as always. He asked me why I was so sure Dan was setting a trap for us. He asked if it had ever occurred to me that the trap was only for me. I didn't understand. I told him it didn't matter, that we were in this together. And that's when he shook his head. He said my panic. It felt very familiar to him. I thought he was talking about his late wife. I braced myself for another dose of his noble grief. But he said that his wife, Elisa, she loved drama, too. She also used to say he was too quiet. She said his calm was suffocating. I froze. I had never asked how, exactly, she died. It seemed too rude. He always just said, an accident. He finally stood up. But he didn't come near me. He walked to the window, turning his back to me. He said she died at 4 in the morning. in the passenger seat of her yoga instructor's car. They hit a bridge. He said she was probably driving over to warn him, too. My own terror was drowned out by his old, second-hand grief. I just stared at his back. He said he knows my type. He wasn't blaming me. He was just stating a fact. He said I wasn't looking for an escape. I was looking for a witness. He said I didn't come to his shop because he was different or real. I came to him because my predator instincts knew, without a doubt, that he, a widower, broken and quiet, would be the perfect alibi for my conscience. He told me I didn't want a quiet life with him. I wanted my loud, shiny life with Dan to get even louder. I didn't want to run away from Dan. I wanted Dan to see me leaving, and to finally make a scene. I realized he was right. My whole affair wasn't an escape. It was a challenge. It was a desperate, ugly attempt to make Dan stop designing and start feeling. I wanted him to fight for me, even if it meant I had to fight against him. Silas turned around. His eyes were cold. He said I was his mistake. That for a minute, he let himself believe I was different. But he just let me use his grief and his shop as a stage for my own expensive, personal drama. He said I use his silence just like Dan uses my beauty. He said I wasn't a hero. I was just noise. He asked me to please leave. He said I was scaring away his real customers. I walked out of the shop. The bell tinkled softly, almost like it was sorry. I was alone on the sidewalk, under the harsh Texas sun. My safe place, my alibi, my justification, it had all just turned to dust. Silas hadn't just dumped me. He had figured me out. And now I had nowhere to run. Nowhere but home. To the barbecue. Saturday. The Texas sun is just relentless. The air smells like brisket smoke, expensive sunscreen, and chlorine from our pool. It's our annual barbecue. The peak of the social season in our little slice of paradise. I park the car a block away and walk. I can hear the laughter and the music long before I even open the gate. All of Austin's elite is here. Developers, a state senator or two, trendy artists. They are all here for Dan. They are all his audience. Any other year, I would be floating through the crowd, the perfect hostess in a perfect linen dress. But today, I walk through them like a ghost. I don't see their faces. I'm walking toward the eye of the storm. Toward Dan. He's at the grill, of course. The glass wall of our house reflects him, like some kind of sun god. He is in his element. He is the king. He's holding tongs in one hand and the microphone he always uses for toasts in the other. He's telling some hilarious story about the mayor. The people around him are roaring with laughter. Silas was right. I was looking for a witness. I wanted Dan to fight with me. I walk right up to him. I don't wait for a pause. I just stop in front of him, cutting him off mid-sentence. The music is still playing. He looks at me, his smile freezing on his face. He sees something in my eyes. He tries to save the scene, telling his guests that his beautiful wife must want a kiss. I tell him we need to talk. Right now. His, for the guests, smile vanishes. His eyes turn cold as ice. He whispers, so no one else can hear, that I will not ruin his party. He tells me, not now. I look at him, and there's no fear left in me. Just emptiness. I tell him I don't care. That I'm leaving him. A second of silence. 2. He stares at me, and I can see the gears turning in his head. He isn't angry. He isn't furious. He starts to laugh. Not a small chuckle. A loud, booming, signature Dan Collins laugh, the kind that usually makes people feel special. He raises the microphone. He taps it. The music stops. 50 people, our entire perfect life, go quiet and turn to look at us. He announces he needs everyone's attention for just a minute. He says his beautiful, unpredictable wife Anna has just told him something incredible. He says she is leaving him. The guests freeze. Someone drops a fork. The silence is deafening. Dan asks for a round of applause. He says, let's clap for her bravery. For her passion. I'm standing there, feeling like I've been drenched in filth. I want to die. Dan looks right at me, his eyes sparkling. He says there's just one problem. He says you can't leave something that you don't even have. He presses a button on a remote that was in his pocket the whole time. The huge, 80-inch outdoor TV, the one that's usually hidden behind the bar, silently slides out and turns on. I expect to see pictures of me. Me and Silas. Evidence. But it's not that. On the screen is a screenshot. The Chase Bank app. My personal account. Anna Collins. The balance, $154.30. Dan puts the microphone to his lips again. His voice booms across the patio, amplified by the Sonos speakers. He says, oh yes, he's known about Silas. For the last 6 months. He says he also knew about my art consultant in Dallas last year. And the Pilates trainer who came before that. I can't move. I'm just staring at the numbers on the screen. Dan clicks the button on the remote again. The screen changes. It's not a photo. It's a PDF document. A spreadsheet. The title, Project, Anna. Profitability report. He says I didn't understand. He says my job at the gallery, my commissions, all my trips. He clicks the remote. The screen shows the logos of his own accounts. Bank of America. His business account. He tells the whole party that all of my money, all of my independence, was just a line item in his budget. Marketing and entertainment. He says I wasn't cheating on him. I was working for him. He looks at me, and his eyes have no love, no hate. Just cold calculation. He says I was his best project. But my latest sub-project, Silas, was unfortunately unprofitable. And he, as a good businessman, is forced to cut the funding. He wasn't my husband. He was my auditor. Silence. It was deafening. 80 inches of my shame, still glowing by the bar. $154.30. 50 pairs of eyes, my friends, my neighbors, were staring at me. They didn't feel sorry for me. They were horrified. But mostly, they were thrilled. This was the best show Austin had seen all year. Dan lowered the microphone. His hand wasn't shaking. And then, into that ringing, stretched out silence, he landed the final blow. He turned to the guests, and his face instantly changed. The horror was gone. The host of the year was back. He laughed. Loudly. He announced that the show was over, but the brisket was just ready. He apologized to everyone for that little, internal corporate restructuring, and, with a grand gesture, invited everyone to the bar. He said the drinks were on the house. And the music. Of course. The music started up again. That quiet, uncaring jazz. It was like a spell. People twitched. They started to move. Awkwardly at first, looking anywhere but at me. Then, with hunger. They moved toward the food, they moved toward the drinks. They threw quick, sideways glances at me. I was not the hostess anymore. I was a spilled cocktail that someone would clean up soon. Silas? Of course, he was not here. Dan must have cancelled his invitation, like you cancel a bad restaurant reservation. The crowd parted, and I was left alone by the pool. Dan walked over to me. Everyone was turned away, busy with the brisket. He was not yelling. He leaned in close, his breath smelling like expensive tequila and smoke. He whispered just one sentence in my ear. He said my progress report had been accepted. And that I was fired. He turned away from me and walked back to his guests. I was standing like a statue in that linen dress. The phone in my hand, which I was still clutching, buzzed. I looked down. It was an email. From Daniel Collins, CEO, Collins Designs. Subject, contract termination. I opened it. There was no pain inside, no rage, no broken heart. Just a short notification that divorce papers were filed this morning. And one PDF file attached. Non-disclosure agreement. I looked up. I looked at him. He was laughing, his arm around some blonde woman, a state senator. He was not the quiet, meditating husband having a crisis. He was the auditor. And I had just failed the audit. I was standing in a house that did not belong to me, in clothes that he bought, in a life that he had sponsored. He did not just take away my husband. He took away my story. He even took away my affair, turning it into a business expense. I looked at my bank balance on his TV. $154. Enough for an Uber to the airport. If I was lucky. And that's the whole story. If you like this story and want to keep hearing more just like it, please be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell, so you don't miss any new uploads. Remember, your support is so important to help this channel keep growing. So, what do you think? There are no innocent people in this story, but who is the real villain here? It's easy to say that cheating is the ultimate betrayal. But what about Dan's revenge? Was that brilliant, cold justice? Or was it just the final act of suffocating control? Is public humiliation and complete financial ruin a fair punishment for lying and emotional betrayal? Was Dan the victim, who was just protecting his assets, like he claimed? Or was he a ruthless manipulator from the very beginning, who had designed Anna, and was just looking for a reason to write her off when she stopped being profitable? And the biggest question, did Anna get what she deserved, or did Dan, by staging this public firing, just prove that Silas was right, that he really does think he's a god, with the right to decide fates and send invoices for human feelings?